welcome to this first Roundtable vlog from workspaceguru.com. I'm Twiest, and today we're going to talk about the biggest elephant in the room at the moment, legacy applications. And we're going to go through some tips and share our experience with those legacy applications. With me are two of my colleagues here at Datron. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Marcel Fennis. I'm indeed a colleague of Chris at Datron. Been working for this company for 8 years now already as a consultant. Try to assist as many businesses as possible with migration from applications and operating systems, etc., etc. Try to do my best in there.
Okay, cool. Thierry?
Hi, I'm Thierry Vos. Also working for Datron 3 years now, almost. Still loving it. Senior consultant, and my main focus is Windows 10, Office 365, so the modern desktop.
The modern desktop, modern workplace.
Yeah.
Great. So we got a bit of a diverse mix here. If you don't know it, I'm also a consultant here at Datron, and my focus is mainly Citrix and modern workplace combined. So a bit of you two combined, and focusing on how are we going to work in the next 5 years. So that's my role here. So let's get started. I just want to go over some tips with you and share our experience and why we think those tips are
Sure.
good tips. So we created those tips together, and now we're gonna share them. So the first tip is make an inventory of your applications. So really take a look at your entire application landscape, indeed, and categorize them in truly SaaS applications, legacy applications, web applications like intranet, or mobile applications, local applications. So know what you have in your landscape of applications, and I think personally that one of the most important things in that situation also is split those legacy applications up in standalone legacy applications like a PDF reader and a client-server legacy application like an Oracle client or something, because they both have a completely different way of working and different way of going into the future.
Different dependencies.
Yeah, different dependencies. So what would you add on that tip, like making inventory and why it's important?
It helps you to get insight in what you currently have, obviously. And there's a lot of companies that still run legacy applications in some old version or other, whilst there's already newer versions available. So having the insight will also make it easier for you to see if there's a fast upgrade path, or rather that you need to go back to the drawing board and redesign.
Yeah, it's indeed very important that you know what you have and know how you're going to handle all these different kind of applications. And yeah, know how they work, know what dependencies indeed there are. If you are unaware of those things, then you cannot predict the outcome that well, and you want to do it good, of course.
Yeah.
So know how it works, know what you need to do.
And especially what you said, dependencies. You know, if an application requires a dongle or requires a certain ini file or something, know your applications. Really get to know your applications. So one of the main reasons I wanted to do this episode is really, if we look in the market and the way that we are going to work in the next 5 years, we see more and more modern workplace. So everyone gets their own mobile device, decentralizing the IT environment, where now there is usually there is still a terminal server centralized somewhere. Now everyone wants to have their own device and do everything themselves. So, and one of the biggest challenges in that decentralization process is, of course, those client-server applications. And those legacy applications, you need to do something with that. So I think you said beforehand we talked a bit. You said it the best, I think, with the decentralization and centralization.
Yeah, it's always a wave form, you know. So obviously we started out with a mainframe and dumb terminals. Then we went to completely decentralized Novell NetWare, Bang and Vines networks. Had OS2 along the way. And then everything started to converge again back to sort of VMware-based backend, everything central, and trying to Citrix some stuff. Then you'll see some shift back towards a fat client. But with whole cloud computing, we're going back to the old way of mainframe working, basically, where your smartphone or tablet is just an endpoint for the information to land on.
Yeah, and that works great with SaaS applications and mobile optimized applications, but it doesn't work with that whole lot of legacy applications we created over those years. So Marcel, what do you think, if we talk about legacy applications, do you think that in the next 5 years we will see that all legacy applications will be gone and the entire industry will just work from SaaS applications?
It would be nice to have that kind of future, but I'm afraid it's not going to happen.
Okay, our second tip is keep your data and application together. Marcel, can you talk about that?
Yeah. Like you say, application next to it, have the data. You do not want to have too much of distance in there. And there are a lot of reasons why you do not want that. One of the reasons, of course, is that if you have your application on your endpoint, how are you going to get that data in there? Are you going to use a VPN or whatever? And what happens if that laptop or endpoint gets stolen or broken or whatever? How are you going to put that data back?
Let's talk about the legacy application and especially client-server application. And like an Oracle client, and you have the Oracle database in your data center, and on the laptop you install an Oracle client and you want to get those data, you're saying you should not use a VPN for that kind of information and getting that information on the client, right?
I would indeed not recommend that. I would look at a solution like what Citrix does, for example, in a published application. Just publish the application to the user on its endpoint.
Yeah.
And from there it looks for the user exactly the same as if the application is running on its system locally.
Can you explain to them what a published application or remote app entails?
Yeah, well, Microsoft as well and Citrix are known that they can publish an application which is not much more than you have a terminal server in your data center or whatever in your Azure, and you have the user sitting at home or on the airfield or whatever, and the user, for example, goes to a website which you have manufactured for this user, logs in, and there he sees the application. Application is shown up as an icon. He presses on that icon, and in the end, in the back end, on the terminal server where the application is actually running, the user starts a user session. The application is started, and only the screen information that is used by this application on this terminal server is presented to this user. So there's no data flowing over, no actual files, no sensitive information that can be stolen or captured or whatever. It's only the information of this application that is going through the line. So even if you have a very limited bandwidth, then you can still use a lot of applications if you just tweak the settings like the graphics and the color depth, etc. To whatever you think is a combination of good performance for the application, and it's also a good way that the application is presented for the user. And if we are going to compare VPN with the data in there, and we are going to compare the published app showing only the application, I think still the last one uses less bandwidth overall.
You really should take this option of the published apps and the remote apps only for client-server legacy applications. Our third tip is really get to know your application. So it comes a little bit back at the first tip, but this tip is really get to know the applications and the workflow that is done with that application. So if we're gonna make all those applications published apps, we do want to know what users are doing with those apps, because certain actions don't really work in a published app. So I know you had recently had some experience at a customer where they had some workflow issues with a remote app. Can you talk about that so that people know what kind of things to watch out for?
Yeah, well, point one was of course know your application more from a technical point of view, and this is more as indeed the process point of view and how the user uses the application.
Yeah.
Indeed, like you said, I was at a company and they've got published some applications on different terminal servers in the backend. And we came into the situation that user A started an application and therefore started an application on server A, let's say, and started another published application. And the user ended up at another terminal server. And as there is no interaction between those backend sessions, the user noticed that he could not do what he wants to do, and in this situation it was being able to copy some files from application A to application B. So there are some limitations or things that you should know indeed on how this application works and how the user uses these applications and interactions between those. Especially if you are going to end up with different kind of terminal servers or Citrix servers in the backend, which are being more like silos, publishing their own applications and not all applications across all the different terminal servers you have.
So, do you think that it should be a part of creating that new workplace, not only making the technical overview of your application landscape, but also doing a bit of user adoption? So starting with that user, looking at that user, okay, what kind of work do you do? And even if there is a change in the workflow, okay, this is not possible anymore with the remote app, so we need to change your workflow. Do that in a soft way with some user adoption programs. So do you see that already being started in the market? I know our company where we work for is now starting to do a lot of adoption programs, but do you already see that also at the customers you visit?
I try to stimulate it. Don't always see it, unfortunately. And I think it's quite important to mention that, you know, we're in this business to make it as simple as possible for the user, and we should never forget that, because sometimes IT thinks they're in business for IT, which is just not the case. So we should be trying to make it as easy for the user to do their job and to not be hindered by any technological barriers.
Yeah. So, and when there is a technological barrier that we just cannot go around,
if it's a fact and they have to deal with it, then we should present it to them in as soft or nice a way as possible. That, you know, that was in the old days, but now you have to do a little shift in your way of working.
Yeah.
Because the world changed.
And I know even if we take a look at something like business consulting, their adoption programs are really created to also increase the efficiency. So sometimes you can take a look at the user's workflow and see, okay, we're going to have a technical problem because this is going to be a remote app and that function won't work, like dragging and dropping a file to a remote app. But it can be done better if we use OneDrive, for instance, to sync the remote app to the client side, which also has OneDrive, so the files are not going through the VPN, are not going through the RDP session or Citrix session, but they are just synced throughout the internet, which is, I think, a great solution. And that process can be really better. So from a business consulting way, doing an adoption program with your users can make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, if users start working more efficiently as a result of that program, then that's money in the pocket.
So our fourth tip, I already mentioned it a little bit in our last tip, is trying to look at the way you use your data in a remote application. So if you need data from your client to the remote application, not copy it throughout your RDP session or Citrix session, not copying it through a VPN, but try and use modern things like Teams or OneDrive with that remote application. So if I, for instance, have to do a PDF export of a remote application, I save that in the OneDrive, which is visible in the Explorer of that remote application. And I got the OneDrive client also sitting on my client device, and I save it there, and within a few seconds, I also have it on my client, and it's completely through the internet, and there is no way I need to wait for a VPN or it's slow on that way. And it's always also from security point, right? The data is kept at one place.
I think one of the nicest points is it's a no-brainer for the user. You know, the user just saves it on his OneDrive. Doesn't matter which application window he uses, but it just lands on his OneDrive. And wherever he addresses his OneDrive, the document's there.
Yeah.
So from a user workflow perspective, this is really easy.
Yeah. And I know Marcel Citrix is doing also a lot of integration with files into their products, like the Citrix Workspace. We're going to talk about that also in a little bit. And trying to combine their files in the web portal. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Indeed, Citrix also has this landscape where they place all the files that the user uses or has access to in a nice central place. With security also in place, of course. Just like you say, it's a sort of no-brainer. The OneDrive, and then Citrix has this solution for it. When you look at it, it's also a no-brainer.
Yeah, and the Citrix solution, it's the files in the Citrix cloud portal. It can also combine OneDrive and SharePoint and Dropbox and all those files in one place. And also, it's what you said, right? User saves it there and can get it from any place. So this was a really quick tip. So we're gonna go to the next one. Our fifth tip is something we touched a little bit on in tip 4. It's using a workspace portal. So I think looking into the future, for now, in the next 5 to 10 years, I think that a great way to cope with the decentralization and centralization that's going on at the moment is not thinking of your workspace anymore as the device. So my laptop is my workspace, my tablet on my phone, but using a portal, in this case a web browser, and that's the workplace. So taking something like a Citrix Workspace, it's just one portal, and in that one portal I find my legacy applications, I find my SaaS applications, I find web applications, those files are there. So the user uses that portal, and everything they want is there.
Yeah.
And from any device.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah.
It's an application. It's a portal that covers it all. And of course, user is not very interested in what the solution in technical terms is. In the end, the user needs to start his application, no matter how that application is running. That's our job, right? That's our headache sometimes. But this Citrix Workspace app combines all the different kind of solutions that we have at our hands to show one environment that covers it all. Indeed, like you said, the files are there, the SaaS applications, the legacy applications. The user just does not have to care. It just needs to work. Yeah, that's our work, of course.
Yeah, And our work now is integrating all those applications into that one portal. I really think that the future is giving people a laptop with Windows 10, with Autopilot, the OS is there and stuff. With Intune it's managed, and they just have one shortcut on the desktop, start work, it goes to that website, all their applications are there. And Citrix is of course not the only product that does that. We have a Dutch company called Workspace 365, it does that also great. Same for Workspace ONE from VMware. But Citrix also is really looking at adding an extra layer of security on your SaaS applications, like watermarking a SaaS application, or saying, okay, you log in from this IP address, so you cannot get files back from that SaaS application. You cannot download files to your local device, which is giving users of IT admins an extra layer of protection, because protection is of course one of the main features that also always have to stand above it all. Every solution must be secured the right way. And I think combining the power of Intune and the power of something like a Citrix Workspace portal helps. What you told, right? The cloud is centralizing and the devices are decentralizing.
Yeah.
And it just matches. It matches great, those kind of portals.
In a way, same as back with the mainframe, where the terminal didn't matter. You know, if the terminal broke down, you just get a new monitor and keyboard, and you're back up again.
Yeah.
And it should be the same with any modern device that you have. You know, if, my laptop from the company broke down a couple of weeks ago, and I got an Exchange laptop. All I had to do was log on with my username and password. Autopilot did the work, and half an hour later, I had my data back, my applications, and I could just do my job again.
Yeah, and I think that we are a bit IT savvy, you know, we know everything. So if our applications are in the start menu somewhere and someone gives you some URLs like, okay, to write your time as a consultant, you go to that URL to write it, and go to this Citrix website to get those remote apps. We know that, but as a user, just having that one icon with also the local apps, there's Citrix apps, the SaaS apps, it's just one complete work environment, and we can brand that also with some customer logos and stuff, and I think that is the way forward. And if we take a look even further into the future, I think that we are also need to take a look at, and I know Citrix is doing that with Actions and VMware is doing the same thing, take a look at really also working in that same portal. So not only launching applications and stuff, but doing some work in the portal. Even Workspace 365 is doing their business apps, which are also just in that portal, which you can just start working. Now Citrix is doing actions, which are API based. So you can do some actions from, let's say, your Salesforce SaaS application.
Yeah.
And you can connect that to that Workspace portal with the API. So like an expense report, you can just see that in that same portal. So not launching Salesforce, just seeing, okay, Salesforce has a new expense report for you. Okay, you click open and you click approve, and the API of the Workspace portal connects to the API of Salesforce and tells it, okay, that user approved it. So in that way, we hit a few things. People are even more efficient because they don't have to launch that second application. They can just work in that one situation. And another great thing is Citrix has also launched a mobile app of their Workspace. And those actions scale perfectly on the mobile app. So even if the SaaS application itself is not optimized for on a mobile phone, those actions are. So that expense report is just like using a mobile app. So I think if we take a look in the next wave of what's going to make it more efficient and better, I think that that's the way we're going to go. So yeah, you use those SaaS applications and your data stays in those SaaS applications, but you just use that one portal to work. So I think if you're looking now at how are we going to work in the next 5 years, I think that you have to think about a workplace as the web browser. So I know that you have an anecdote of why a Workspace portal won't work for certain customers. So yeah.
Again, back to the airline. engineering department, which has ground engineers basically who service and repair the airplane. They use applications on either an iPad or a tablet or something like that. But as soon as they walk into the airplane, we've got to deal with a phenomenon called the cage of Faraday, which means that there's hardly any signal in there. So basically having a web application on the iPad is not going to be a good idea for the people that work in the airplane.
So that portal, the new workplace is the web browser. The web browser would just say, cannot connect.
Indeed.
So we need to think about that too.
So there has to be some sort of offline capability, or for some, or you should go back and see what specific tasks are they carrying out within the airplane.
Yeah.
Make those available offline and keep the rest online for whenever they exit.
Yeah, because that is of course one thing. Maybe you can talk about it. That with things like Workspace portal or remote apps, there is no way to buffer that offline, right?
No. There is just one thing that you need to have, and that's a connection. That's just a connection.
Yeah.
The bigger the connection is, the better, of course. But if you don't have a connection, you are not able to use the published apps.
So I'm someone who is advising people about the new desktop, for instance, and I'm now thinking about those published and remote apps. And one of my users tells me, I work every morning in the train, and when the train goes through a tunnel, I lose all signal. It's about 30 seconds, no signal. So would that user, if it's working on the train with Citrix remote apps, for instance, published apps, would they lose their work they're doing at the moment?
Now that's then the positive side of this is no. That's the answer. There's no data loss. There's no. It's only an interruption of the connection, which is then simply only the connection between the endpoint, the user, and his session running on the terminal server in the backend. So only the
video of the stream of the video,
exactly.
The image. Yeah.
So that gets interrupted. You are able to tweak those settings as an administrator, of course. But if the connection is restored, the session will be picked up where it left, with the mouse pointer at the same location as the
so there's no data loss.
There's no data loss.
So our next tip is tip 5, and it's a bit of something different than we have been talking about before, because it's more about packaging. And I want to quickly talk about Chocolatey packaging, and why I think that, or why we think, we came up with the tips together. Chocolatey is a great way to go forward.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Chocolatey, it's just perfect. Once you have it, you don't want to lose it. In the end, it does not change anything on the application that's being handled in there, of course. So the application is just the application still. But it's so nice for this technique that we now have, that there is just a simplified way and a unique way to install all of those different kind of applications in just the same manner, the same way, for all those kind of applications. They have an open repository with a lot of applications like Notepad++, VLC, WinRAR,
the freeware.
The freeware applications.
Yeah.
Those application packages are always working. It's just
and Chocolatey also doesn't do any virtualization or layering with that application.
No,
it just installs the application.
It simplifies the way that
we deploy.
Exactly. And in highly demand environments that we are used to be working in, it's just a great tool to have.
Yeah, because I think you already touched on it. Chocolatey is really a command line, a PowerShell command line tool. You just type in Choco install and the package name you want. If it's in the public repository, it will download it on the device and you're ready to go. Or you can connect your own repository and do the same. And I think one great thing and why you should look at Chocolatey is if we talk now about installing some local applications, you know, that's especially the legacy applications that are standalone, like the PDF reader and stuff. Just install that on the endpoint. Put the local shortcut in that Workspace portal. Put the client-server legacy applications on remote apps. So now we have to install things on that local device, and we have to install things on that remote app server. So, and the installation is different, right? On the local device we now use, of course.
If you're cloud-based, Intune. If you're on-prem-based, SCCM. Or
yeah, and on that remote device, we usually use something like, I don't know, also SCCM, sometimes Ivanti, sometimes app layering and stuff. And Chocolatey, because it's just command line, so every client device, if it's a remote server or it's the normal client device, you can install a software on there with only a command line.
Yeah.
And Intune is great in running command lines like PowerShell.
Yeah.
So you can just add those packages that way. And the same is if you are using like Ivanti automation to make your whole Citrix image, it's also great to just run PowerShell scripts. So that's our tip. Try and look at putting everything in Chocolatey packages so that you can deploy it to all kinds of devices. And really and take advantage for your freeware of that global repository, and for your own company software, the other repository, I think. Make your own repository. So yeah, and our last tip, and I think one of the most important tips, and tip that Thierry came up with, do you want to say it yourself?
Yeah.
Tip 6?
Make sure that business critical applications don't become legacy software. In other words, and I've been hearing this a lot in the various companies that have been, that, oh yeah, we can't get rid of this software because it's really critical to our operation. Okay, so why didn't you upgrade it since last decade?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not possible to upgrade. Sometimes they have to switch to a new supplier or something, and there's migrations and costs. But always remember that, you know, if you push costs like that for migration ahead, they're only going to get bigger.
That's a good tip. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna get worse. So you're saying really invest in your company.
Yes.
Invest in those business critical apps. Make those apps SaaS as possible. And what we talked about back with the Workspace portals, making them like micro apps in those portals, or so that people can also use them on their smartphone and stuff, I think is really important right now. Of course, it is an investment, but we also talked about return of investment if you make things more efficient.
Yeah.
So I think that the last tips ties everything nice together. And I think we got we talked about a whole lot solutions. I will post the tips in the text. I will be doing more of these vlogs on my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is also Workspace Guru. You can also visit the blog workspace-guru.com. For now, I really want to thank you, Marcel Fennis, and you, Thierry Vos, for being here today, talking about this, being a first guest on the Roundtable. And yeah, I hope that you subscribe to my channel and we have more of these interesting conversations. And I hope that each of you would be back on another Roundtable for another topic.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys.